Good day, and welcome to another one of Ransom's Weekly Wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual, what we're going to do is start off with a general market segment and end with a tech/AI segment. In our general market this week, we will talk about the US elections. Like I said, we're going to be discussing this every week until the election, which is basically less than a month away. Then we're going to discuss the passing of Tito Mboweni. It's nice. It might be a good time not just to look at his history, but also to look at what South Africa's economic situation has been in the past and what it might look going forward. Then we'll also look at EU inflation. In our tech segment, we're going to have two stories. Firstly, we're going to look at Netflix's results, and I'm going to give you my thesis around the streaming sector. And then in the AI segment, we'll also look at Nvidia and their latest model and what does it mean going forward. So let's start off with the US election. This week the race seems to be moving again in Donald Trump's favor. It's not a huge move. Even the most optimistic betting markets has him ahead, as a 3-2 favorite. 3-2 is not a great guarantee of success. It's good, better than being 2-3, but it's not a great guarantee of success. So the race remains reasonably, close. Lots of discrepancies in polling between various pollsters out there. Some having him slightly ahead, some having Harris slightly ahead. But I think the trend, if you had to look at that, for each individual pollster, still seems to indicate that at the very least, Harris is not getting around. Probably a reasonable assumption to make across most of these pollsters is that over the last, say, month or so, Harris has kind of dropped off slightly from the momentum she got from both the debate as well as her convention. We still have 3 weeks or so to go. I suspect we won't get to a point at the end of those 3 weeks where there's going to be a clear-cut favorite going into the election. This is important because I suspect if there's not a clear-cut favorite, we're unlikely to get results really quickly after the election date. We might have it delayed a few days, maybe a bit longer. And the current situation that the US is experiencing, if it comes down to a situation like we had back in 2000 with Al Gore and George W. Bush, where eventually it had to be decided by the Supreme Court. If this time around the Supreme Court, which is again, heavily Republican, decides to basically appoint effectively Trump as the president of the United States, I don't think the Democrats will accept that as easily as Al Gore accepted his defeat back in 2000. On the other hand, if it turns out that Trump loses by a small margin, especially after a lot of fluctuations in the leadership for the election, we would expect if the election is really close, at some point in time Trump will be ahead, some point in time Harris will be ahead before the final result is finally given. Given the history back in 2020, I don't know what exactly will be the response of the Republican Party. It could very well be something similar to what we saw on January 6th, or it could be in January 6th, 2021, or it could be that given the rather significant sentences that were handed out, people getting multiple years in prison for participating in the January 6th riots, you'd have far less willingness to go to the streets to riot in favor of Trump. It remains to be seen. This week we had also a interview by Kamala Harris, on Fox News. This was seen to be her toughest interview so far. The first time she's done something like this, where she's basically gone to a tough interviewer who's not on her side, to have basically an unedited interview. Again, it's all about perception about these interviews and what's coming out of it. The Democrats say she was wonderful. The Republicans say she was terrible. I watched it. There were some parts that were good. There were some parts that were bad. But the fact that she's doing these interviews indicates to me that she's actually nervous about the election. The reason being is as follows. A month ago, she wasn't doing these interviews. Why? Because she was ahead. The fact that she's not doing these interviews and even talking about going on places like Joe Rogan would indicate that basically they see themselves being behind, and if you are behind, you have to take more risks. When you were ahead, you could basically kind of rest on what you had, and that's what the situation like a month ago. Right now, they are taking more risks, indicating that the trend that we are seeing in polls probably is true, and the Democrats are likely slightly behind in the election. But like I said, it's not so far behind that it's going to be a guaranteed loss. But probably if you had to bet, you'd probably bet slightly more for Trump than for Harris at this point in time. Next, Tito Mboweni passed recently. This is after the passing of Praveen Gordhan, just a few weeks ago. He was reasonably young nowadays, he's 65. It's not a very old age. But it's worth looking at his history and what he did. And, maybe some people are sometimes, fooled by the kind of social media presence he had, with the Lucky Star, tin fish cooking and so on. And they kind of forget just how well he handled the South African economy when that was his remit as the Reserve Bank governor. Back in the day, we had 2008, the financial crisis. That was near the end of his term as the governor of the Reserve Bank. And the governor of the Reserve Bank, as the Reserve Bank, one of their responsibilities is taking care of the financial system of a country. If you look at how well South Africa basically went through 2008, I'm not saying that we came out unscathed. I'm not saying that we did, we're totally unaffected by it. But you compare us to places elsewhere in the world, in Europe, in North America, in parts of Asia, we were definitely among the best performing economies relative to other economies out there. And you cannot have that unless the person running the institution in charge of your financial system was doing a good job. At the same time, we had possibly the best period of economic growth ever in South Africa's post-apartheid history during that time as well. And now he wasn't responsible entirely for that. It was part of course with Trevor Manuel and Thabo Mbeki and that little team, etc. But he was definitely, a major leader at that time. And had we continued growing at the rate we were growing during that period of time, South Africa's economy would be more than twice as large as it is right now. Imagine looking at your paycheck and seeing twice as much money as you're getting right now. That would mean what our situation would have been had we continued the growth rates that were common during Tito Mboweni's first term. So he was, like I said, despite like the personality he put on social media as a jovial kind of person, he was also an extremely accomplished, Reserve Bank governor. If you look at it purely on the results he achieved, and like I said, the fact of the matter is, our banking system, our financial system, got through 2008 better than almost all comparable economies out there, and better than any of the developed countries that you would see, like places like the UK, Germany, etc. We did really well. Even compared to our banking valuations versus American banking valuations at the time, our banks were among the most stable banks in the world. Again, the person in charge of this thing was Tito Mboweni. He was the person in charge of the institution that was responsible for keeping stability in the financial sector, and he had been there for a long time. It wasn't like, he just came into a good system and that was the system that basically just managed to go through the financial crisis really well. No, he'd been there almost a decade, and he was certainly, you have to say, partly responsible for the success we had during that time, or at least the relative stability we had during that time. Okay, and then let's look at EU inflation. It's coming below 2%. That means it's below target. At the same time, we are seeing Germany in a recession. Again, another period of growth that's negative. Given those things, we would expect rate cuts to continue, at quite a strong pace in the EU. I think the fact of the matter is that inflation right now does not seem to be a significant threat. We are seeing that coming through, for instance, in the oil market, where oil prices, can't seem to, get any traction at all, despite the fact that we are seeing tensions rise quite dramatically in the Middle East, with the threat of Iran and Israel getting into a far higher level of conflict than we have right now. The reason that we can't see that is because economic growth is depressed in places like Europe, in places like China, etc. The US, to some extent, is kind of overcoming this. They are slowing down probably, but they are not in danger of a recession just yet. But we are seeing economic growth slowing down. We are seeing prices, coming down. In that scenario, I think rate cuts are very well warranted in the EU, and I would not be surprised to be seeing them possibly taking the lead over the US in terms of the speed and the size of their cuts going forward. Now, let's look at our tech segment. So, we're going to discuss two things here. One is Netflix results, and more broadly, my take on the streaming sector. And then we're going to discuss Nvidia and the latest model. So, coming to Netflix, for those that don't know, Netflix, of course, streaming service. You basically pay a subscription fee and you get access to a whole bunch of stuff for the period of a month, and then every month you pay a new fee, and then you get whatever's available for the next month. It's as much as you can eat, effectively, entertainment. That's kind of been the default way we are getting entertainment at the moment, like Spotify, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. All these things are effectively they stop selling you individual films, individual songs, whatever. They sell you a period of access to a library. Now, Netflix results, not bad. Look, the stock price has, obviously came under a little bit of pressure when the results came out, just because it rallied so strongly for the last, year to date or so. That is to be expected when you have really high expectations, when you already had a really high run-up. Even reasonably good results are not going to be enough. But I do think there are dangers for the Netflix business model that we should discuss. So, subscriptions were up. By the way, they're going to take away the subscription feature of information, I think, next year. So very soon they're going to stop giving us numbers on subscribers. I suppose you could still figure out how many subscribers there are, because they still have to tell you how much money they made. And if you figure out how much the cost per unit is and how much money they made, you'll get a pretty good idea of how many subscribers they are. But they are going to take it out because they think it's too overemphasized by analysts. But the subscription model that we're talking about here, it's viable, but it's not the optimal way of kind of exploiting or using intellectual property in the entertainment sector. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just compare, say, Disney to Netflix. Disney does something, Netflix does something. Let's see how this works out for them. One of the most popular things Netflix has ever done has been Stranger Things. It's this TV show, characters, it's like a kind of like child-friendly show, young kids save the world kind of thing. Good characters, they made some stars. Some of the actress, I think, from there has done really well since then. Even some of the actors have also gone out and done some other stuff as well. So we are seeing like a normal intellectual property that has franchise ability, let me say. Now compare that to something that, for instance, Disney did. Let's just say looking at something, for instance, like Mickey Mouse. Okay, Mickey Mouse, basically, it was a cartoon back in the day. We're talking over 100 years ago. But how did Mickey Mouse kind of translate into money for Disney versus how does Stranger Things translate into money for Netflix? Stranger Things, very popular, like I said, famous characters, good business for them, made a lot of people subscribe to the service, etc. But that's where the money ends. People subscribe to the service, that's where the money ends. Disney does Mickey Mouse. They sell tickets for Mickey Mouse, the Mickey Mouse film back in the day. Those tickets are nothing to the revenue that we've got from Mickey Mouse since then. They didn't have Mickey Mouse at theme parks. They have Mickey Mouse merchandise. They have Mickey Mouse games and books and all this other stuff. When Disney gets an IP, be it Mickey Mouse, be it Star Wars, be it Pirates of the Caribbean, which is kind of a reverse, where they went from a park to the movie, but fed back to each other as well. They are able not just to make money from the initial sale of the IP for you to watch it. But they will make sometimes many times more money from sales of merchandise, visits to theme parks, other kind of media like books and movies, TV shows and stuff that are separate to what the original kind of IP was. The example I'll give here is Star Wars. Disney owns Star Wars right now, but it was before that was part of George Lucas's stable. Star Wars made less than 1%. The initial movie was less than 1% of the total revenue that Star Wars has generated since it was created. So they made a movie, and the money that movie got at the box office was less than 1% of the total revenue that came eventually to Star Wars, after you account for things like the other movies, and after you account for things for like the merchandising, after you account for things like the TV shows and all the other stuff that's come out of it. Netflix may be able to get franchises going. They could do spin-offs on Stranger Things. They could get that going, but they don't have the theme park infrastructure. They don't have the kind of universe that Disney creates, because Disney doesn't have, like, for instance, Mickey Mouse. It has Mickey Mouse and Goofy, and it has Minnie Mouse. It has a whole theme together that kind of creates a universe that has a life of its own. Netflix can't do that, and the inability to kind of really monetize your intellectual property, I think, is a real danger for Netflix going forward, because they could do stuff just as good, maybe sometimes better than what Disney does. But Disney can just make more money for the stuff that works than Netflix can. And eventually that money is going to make, bigger movies, pay on bigger stars. Eventually it's going to translate into a better product, because, if you pay money to make something, the more money you have, the better stuff you're going to get. Disney just has more money and will get more money from every kind of unit of intellectual property success they have than Netflix can. And then if you look at the other big competitor in the space, Amazon Prime, they have a model that also translates their intellectual property into other sources of revenue. In this case, the Amazon Prime subscription can be a loss leader. Netflix has to make money from the subscription. That's its source of money. Amazon Prime does not make money, or not need to make money from Amazon Prime, because anyone that gets Amazon Prime also gets the delivery service. And if you have that delivery service for Amazon, you spend a lot more money on Amazon. Amazon Prime could be losing money from the amount of money it spends on things like Lord of the Rings, which has been a bit of a disaster for the company. But it has the ability to make money beyond just the subscription fee for the intellectual property. Again, another source of revenue that's bigger than just the subscription fee that Netflix has to kind of rely on entirely, though it has discussed things like advertising and so on. But the danger Netflix faces is that it's kind of like restricted in terms of how much money it can actually extract from successes like Stranger Things, versus companies like Amazon or Disney can from their successes. Next, moving on to Nvidia. Nvidia released a new open source model this week, doing really well on the charts. Better than like some of the paid for models from like Anthropic and from OpenAI. And the important thing to look here is that when it comes to the AI sector, everybody seems to be able to make these models. Yes, the latest version of that preview model that GPT has put out, it seems to be better than OpenAI has put out. Seems to be better than other models, but it doesn't seem to be so much better that consumers are just blown away by it. We need to be seeing, when the new models come out, hopefully next 3 months or so, a step change, a significant improvement in terms of the performance of these models. Otherwise, the danger is that the AI models are going to commoditize around this level, and all you're going to get from these companies is going to be cheaper models of the same power. And though that'll be good for us going forward as an economy, as a culture and whatnot, if AI doesn't get to the next level, doesn't get to genius and super genius levels in terms of performance, a lot of the promise around AI won't be fulfilled. A lot of the valuations we see right now won't come true. Not to say it won't have an impact on the world, but we need to see models that are significantly better. And the fact that Nvidia, Grok, Claude, OpenAI all have models on a similar kind of level, that is not showing the next step up, that's a danger. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you guys in next week. Cheers.